here tonight to be entertained, to know that God is with them, to know that we're all gathered in this space to be held in your light, educated, made ourselves prosperous. Let God be our guide every day, every evening, and every year that we survive on this earth. Thank you, God, for this time. Amen.
Just give that to Paula. Let's see. Oh, we have announcements because it's SLC, and that's what we do here is announcements. Cell phones, if you would please silence your cell phones. Just let them take a nap for a while. The chaplains will have their healing circle next door right after we have our wonderful conversation. And next week, we have Stan Padilla. How many people are familiar with Stan? He has recently been in India, and his topic is Full Awakening, a Golden Opportunity. And he's going to be visiting us, talking about his visiting and studying at some Buddhist monasteries in India. He meditated in ancient caves and in traditional learning centers, and he's going to bring us a gentle chanting and just a very, very kind of soft, introspective evening. So that's next week. And then the week after that, Anne Roach and Elizabeth Pruitt are going to be here. They are both certified music practitioners, and so they're going to be coming and talking to us about how sound and music are the medicine for today. And she had sent me a quote saying that, sound and music are the medicine of tomorrow, and I said, nah, they're the medicine of today. So they will be here in 2 weeks, and so we just have a wonderful WOW lineup. So just take a breath. We're going to do a song, and then we'll go into the rest of the program.
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than how could anyone ever tell you that you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul, to my soul. How to my soul.
That's a beautiful song. Good evening, everybody. Well, I have the pleasure of introducing Deborah if you haven't heard about her yet. So, Rev. Deborah Phillips is an ordained New Thought minister, a teacher, artist, and writer. Her passion is spiritual exploration, the process of discovering one's personal relationship with the divine. She has been studying metaphysics for over 40 years, primarily within the Unity religious science framework, but her interest is far-ranging when it comes to spirituality. She is our assistant minister here at Spiritual Life Center and the director of our Wednesday W.O.W program. She also facilitates spiritual exploration discussion group on Thursday mornings here at SLC. Please welcome Deborah, Rev. Deborah Phillips.
So the tables have turned.
Yeah, I'm just being put on the spot as an interviewer. But this should be very easy because you have so many interesting things to share, I'm sure. And I believe it's about a little over 2 years that you showed up on the SLC landscape.
I've actually been on the landscape for 7 years.
Oh,
I started with Claire's book group in the spring of 2012. And then I was invited into the WOW experience in 16. So we're actually in our fourth year of WOW.
year. Wow.
Yeah,
Oh.
time just flies when you're having this much fun.
It is collapsing, I believe. That's what I hear. Space is
Yeah.
expanding and time
Yes,
is
it's
collapsing.
collapsing,
I
yeah.
definitely experience it that way.
Yeah.
Well, my first memory of you, I met you in the courtyard, and you were coming to facilitate a memorial. I don't remember who it was for, but that was the first day I met you.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. My sister died in September of 2013, and she lived in Colorado. And to get to her house, you drove forever. You went past the end of the universe and turned right and went another 5 miles. So I was up there. Yeah, it was not easy to get there. So I was up there when she died. I was there for the last 2 days of her life. And then they decided not to have the memorial service until October 1st, which is her birthday. And so we weren't going to go back. It just, we had all said goodbye. And I thought, going to memorial services really helps you. And 3 memorial services popped up, and they gave them all to me. And so I did about 3 in a row. I did one in a park, I did one here, and I did one somewhere else in the space of about a month. And that was how I got to go through the grieving with my sister, was doing memorial services for other people. And so I guess that is, of course I knew who you were because I was one of the witnesses, like these, but that's probably the first time I came on your radar.
What was the first time we actually had a conversation?
I guess so, yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, we started working together on the WOW, and
Yeah.
that's been a wonderful experience to collaborate with you on that. So we'd love to hear some of you titled your talk, How I Got to Where I Am Going.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start that story for us?
Well, when I'm doing the interviewing, I always ask, did a person grow up with any kind of spiritual training? And I did indeed. I remember being taken to the Methodist church. I was probably about 5 or 6, and they put me in Sunday school, and all we did, I swear their entire program was to bore kids to death, because all we did was color pictures of Jesus. That's all we did. That's all I remember about the whole thing. I don't even remember them talking to us. It's just let's go color another picture of Jesus. And Williams, Arizona is a very small town, 3,000 people. The blocks are really short. And one Sunday, we drove up to the Methodist church. My sister got out of the back seat and started walking down the street. And it was like, where's she going? Well, she's going to the Episcopal church. And I desperately wanted to go with her. Anything was better than coloring another picture of Jesus. And my mom said no. And it took my mom about, I don't know, several months before she got the nerve to change churches, because in a town that small, and my mother's entire life was about what would other people think. She didn't want to hurt the feelings of the Methodist minister. So, but she finally went to the Episcopal Church, and I refused. Not that I was a difficult child, but I refused to go to Sunday school. And she said, Mrs. Cole will get her feelings hurt. And I said, fine. And she, Mrs. Cole would have had her feelings hurt anyway. And she said, you have to be, if you're going to go to church, you have to be really, really quiet. And I said, I can do that. You have to be really, really quiet. And so I loved it. I loved the liturgy, which they only did once a month, but I loved it. And I would sit in church, and there was a presence. I just always felt this presence right next to me, especially in church. I identified it as Jesus because that was, at that point, the only being that I, at 7 or 8 years old. And so I just loved it, and I was very quiet in church because there was no way I was ever going to go back and color another picture of Jesus. So I grew up in the Episcopal Church, and I also was very much involved in, my father was a Mason, and there was Rainbow Girls, and my mother was an Eastern Star, and that's
What's a Rainbow Girl?
a Rainbow Girl. You're going to love this. Is that well? Okay, so there's the Masonic Lodge, and then they have organizations for the women and for the young daughters. There's Job's Daughters, and there's Rainbow Girls, and the rainbow is based on the promise that God would never, I give you a rainbow, I will never destroy the earth again. And there are actual stations it's a circular organization. We had a fancy initiation, but there are stations that were actually the bow. And so they sat in the middle of the room, and in front of each one was a pedestal with a color on it. So you see me doing a lot of that because it's absolutely, from the time I was 12, I was immersed in it. And during the initiation, they go around and they get a lecture from each one of these stations, and then you take the streamer and you hook it to the white altar. So a lot of what you see, so I started with that. And then there were other stations, like the worthy advisor was like the president, but there was faith, hope, and charity. And I spent a long time as I got older in the station of hope. After I got too old to be part of the thing, it was like there's state officers, and I became a state officer, and I was hope. And then after that was over, I would go around and substitute. And so my favorite station in Rainbow, it was the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet, and it was love, religion, nature, immortality, fidelity. They're gone. Love, religion, nature, immortality, fidelity, something else, and service. I can't remember what. See, indigo's always an issue, Paula.
What is indigo?
It will come back. And so there were all these lessons, and it was, so I came, on some level, I was being taught metaphysics from the time I hit the planet. And I remember my father telling me I should read this Masonic book that's this thick. And if you think Alice Bailey is hard to read, I even try to read it now every once in a while, Dogma and Doctrine. And it's very deep. So somehow or another, I came into this planet primed to do metaphysical stuff, I guess. I didn't really know what I was looking for, but it was just, there was always something there, and Rainbow was basically what saved me and got me through high school.
So it sounds like then you had, with that foundation, you really launched into spiritual science, really.
Well, yeah, and I didn't know I was, because about the time my father died, we had a neighbor who gave me a book called The Art of Selfishness. And it was all about really how to take care of yourself and say no. And it was groundbreaking at the time, and my mother was horrified that I was reading it because I certainly didn't want to be selfish. And the man who gave it to me was just anti-metaphysics, and he said, "This is not metaphysical." And it totally was. But I didn't know that. It wasn't until I was 25 that I actually hit the circuit, hit the churches. And because my father had a heart attack when I was 10, and for I don't know, probably about 20 years ago, maybe 15, I realized that every time I told a story about my childhood, I always said it happened to me when I was 10. It's like everything froze for me because everything changed after that. And so, there was a lot of working through all of the family stuff, and my mother didn't deal with my father being well at all. And then he died 3 days after my 21st birthday. But my father's whole journey saved me. My mother and I had a bit of a power struggle, and I've had psychologists tell me, I never thought about it. They said, no, your mother saved you from your dad. Your dad saved you. And after he died, I went off in a completely different direction than I probably would have. I probably would have thought I had to get married and have kids and stay in Williams if my father had stayed alive.
But what happened instead?
Well, what happened instead was after he died, I went nuts for a little while. And because I actually spent like a year helping my mother through her grieving. I didn't really grieve my father's death for many years. And so things were I was out trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I got married a couple of times. People ask me how times I'm married. Well, I was married for like 9 months or 8 months. And then I was dating this guy. I was just having some fun, and my mom called me up and says, "Don't you dare marry him." So that was the second marriage. And you know what?
A bit of a rebel, I'm seeing.
Well, but the thing is I look at people now, it's just like, don't you people know your kids? And you know if you say something to them, they're going to do it. And so then she threatened to move out of town because I'd embarrassed her. And yeah, but the second one, it turns out the guy had a personality disorder. And I had, back in 71, who knew what that was? And so he did, but he was not mean to me, but he lied about everything. He told me, he says, I'll go to 7-Eleven and tell you I went to Circle K just 'cause. And I did that for 7 years, and it taught me to be a survivor, because I didn't, growing up, I had plenty to eat, plenty of clothes, plenty of, I never had to work to survive, and it really brought out the survivor in me, so when I know what it was. So one Christmas, we were going to go with some friends to go up into the mountains to get a Christmas tree. And Dick and Judy, and they had a little Bronco, and we were going to go with them, and got up that morning, and Dan didn't want to go. And it was like I was desperate to get out of town. We were in a place where we had almost no money, and we were just, I'm not sure how we were surviving. And I was in tears because I just needed to get out of town. And I heard a voice in the back of my head that said, if you don't go, you will never see them again. Well, I didn't think a lot about it. This thing's always been here, whatever. And so I finally talked him into going. Then we went up and we got the Christmas trees, and we were coming back down, and it was a divided highway. And we got behind a white car that had a tree in the trunk. And we were kind of making jokes about, how kind of silly it looked. And then this guy was following this car really close. And we thought, well, why doesn't he just go around him? It's a divided highway. And he didn't. So Dick finally pulled over and started to pass. And the white car, I remember watching the white car hit us twice. And then the next thing I knew, we were going this way, and the vehicle was like this. And Dan and I were in the back seat. And Richard, the guy who was driving, was the most soft-spoken man. He said, "Get out." And he turned and he just screamed at his wife, "Get out now." So she got out, and Dan got out and pulled me out, and we pulled Dick out. And I walked over and looked, and it was straight down.
Oh, you mean you were hanging over the edge?
We were hanging over the edge. And and I thought, okay, but when I looked down, it was straight down, and if we hadn't been there in the back of the Bronco, it would have gone over. So I went home, and I thought, and I had left the Episcopal Church because they ticked me off, and I thought, maybe I should go back to church. So I started looking through the Yellow Pages. How many people remember Yellow Pages? Oh, this group would, right. And I thought, could I stand to go to a Baptist church? Could I stand to, and I'm going through all these things, and there was this ad for this church And I'd never heard of it. I didn't know anything about it, and I thought, that sounds safe. And so the next Sunday we went, and we walked down, and it was a round building. It had blue carpet this thick. The minister was, I'm guessing, 140. He was, and he was the most boring person on the planet. But when I walked in the building and set my foot down in there, I knew I was home. And it was an independent metaphysical church. And about a few months later, I found out about unity. Now, I'm 25 years old, and I was so mad that nobody had, all these years, and nobody's ever told me about unity. All these years, I've been alive. All of 25.
Okay, so at 25, so you said we went, so did your husband
The husband
went with
went, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, I got totally into it and realized that I needed, I'm responsible for my own life. And it changed everything. It changed my
That was the
relationship.
beginning of the end of that marriage.
It was actually, and it changed my relationship with my mother because my mother was doing a very codependent thing for me because she felt very guilty about like kind of pushing me out of the house before my dad died. And after he died, she's like, oh, we gotta, and I'm the youngest. And so I was the one who put a stop to all of that. I have to learn to take care of myself. And then after a while, Dan just thought I had gone nuts, which a lot of people do when we make this shift. And so then I started studying for the ministry pretty quickly after that, at religious science. Because my mentor at the Unity Church said, I'm not even going to try to send you to Unity Village. He didn't tell me then, but I'm sure it's because I didn't have a degree and I was only 25. And his mother was the religious science minister, and she had changed over to religious science so she could train ministers in the field. And I went and interviewed with her, and she accepted me, but she did not like me. She did not want me there, and she was one of the worst possible teachers on the planet. And I have been gifted with several really atrocious teachers. No, they're gifts because they teach you what not to do. And so I studied for 3 years with religious science in my late 20s and got a divorce during that time.
So where did that lead you with after that 3-year period?
Well, then I held off and got married again. And we moved to Salt Lake City. And Salt Lake City, this is not something I've ever told anybody here in Sacramento. In Salt Lake City, they didn't have the same religious science church as they were split at that point. So I couldn't finish my training because the other religious science church didn't accept what this one was doing. And so I came back down and I talked to my mentor, and he said, he knew me. He said, the Fillmores just ordained themselves. So I was really good friends with the Sikh, the American Sikh community there. And so we just hauled off and had an ordination ceremony.
You created one?
Yeah, I just created one. And I started having services, and 3 or 4 people would show up, but I never, ever had to pay for it was a Holiday Inn back in the days when you could rent a room for like nothing. I never, ever paid for my room, and I'm guessing if I had stayed there, it would have built. But I was really young, and I didn't really have the training. And then that marriage, of course, also didn't work. And then my mom died, and I finally realized maybe I keep getting married because I'm trying to get away from my mother. So after my mom died, I got divorced, and I was single for 22 years. So, I went back and tried to finish the religious science training, but they don't like people who do psychic work, and they don't like people who have all this other stuff. So it was really clear that wasn't where I was supposed to be either. So I just kicked around and I studied with the spiritualists, and that's an interesting group of people, especially another really, really crazy, really, really just inept teacher, and she taught me so much by her ineptitude. And one day she walked up to a friend of mine and said, most people have one strong gift, like clairvoyance, and then another secondary one. It's really unusual for someone to have 3 really strong gifts. And she walked off. She never told it to me. She never said it to anybody in the class. She just told a friend of mine.
About you.
About me. Yeah.
Interesting.
And she tried to turn me, and they wanted me to become a certified medium. And it was like, I learned a lot about how my gifts work through them, and it was a very valuable experience. But, talking to the dead has its limits. I'm just saying, it has its limits. And I think the last real reading I did with somebody was a woman who had been with a man for years, but they lived in separate houses, and he dropped dead on his porch one day, and so I helped her say goodbye to him. And that's the last one I've really done like that. Not that they don't come in and chat, but it's not what I spend most of my time doing.
Very interesting. I've had a few chats with dead people too.
I mean, it can be useful, but my mentor had told me once that the spiritualists were not allowed to belong to International New Thought, the INT Association, because if they knew more than we did, they wouldn't be dead. Yeah, he said, what's the point of talking to dead people? Because if they knew more than we do, they wouldn't be dead. And at the time, I thought it made sense, and now it doesn't make any sense to me at all.
I'm not making sense out of that.
Yeah, but I have to tell you one thing, is that one of the gifts that he gave me was when he said, he sent me over to religious science for training, and I cried for a week because I was leaving Unity. And I told him, I know this is silly, and he said, it's all one thing. And that's the greatest gift he gave me, is I didn't get locked into any one organization. It was the best thing that ever happened.
I find it interesting that the spiritual science world, that it sounds like they stick strictly in the head. And I mean, the intuition and the other faculties of spiritual perception didn't seem to be. It sounds like it was not incorporated into the scheme.
Well, it's an interesting conundrum, and it's one of the those of you who've been in my group, you've heard this a lot of times. But what's so interesting to me about all of this is that once you start down this path and you start to meditate and you start to open up, your intuition starts to work. You start to get feelings about things. You start to open up to another level, right? And Ernest Holmes taught very specifically against psychism. And I have come to believe that that's partly because when he was first teaching, the spiritualists in the 20s and 30s were just everywhere. And it was all this external stuff. And what he was trying to say was, it comes from within. The intuition comes from within. The messages come from within. And to learn that part of it, I mean, I worked as a psychic for a while to support myself. I did a bunch of things, and I finally got to the point where, that's horizontal energy. It's reading the energy this way, and it's the vertical energy. It's like your music is vertical energy, and that's where we really thrive, is when we're working in a vertical way. So everything that I've been doing, little by little, and I worked for years with no church at all, just kind of doing my own thing, counseling people here and there, or whatever, and then how I landed here. I had gone back to Christ Unity. I was in the prayer group. And that was working great for me because it was prayer and it was intense stuff, and we didn't do a lot of mental. And then my husband decided he liked Jim Lee, and we started going to church. And one day I was sitting in church, Jim Lee's talking, and I got a picture of all of these, of a tray sitting on my lap with all kinds of golden objects on it. And it was like, you have all this gold sitting here and you're not doing anything with it. Okay, what do I do with it? About 2 weeks later, Jim Lee is talking again, and a voice very clearly said, it's time, call Blaine Mays and ask him if he will ordain you. My mentor from 34 years ago. And he had left Unity and had taken over his mom's church and gone completely independent. And so I called him up and I said, hey, Blaine, remember me? Yeah. And I said, here's what I've been doing for the last 34 years. Will you ordain me? He said, I would love to. And so I finished up my Master in Fine Arts and Poetry degree, graduated on a Sunday, got on a plane Monday morning, flew down to Phoenix, and he ordained me. So there were 4 people in the room when I was ordained. 5.
So you're ordained as what now?
It's a New Thought. I'm a New Thought minister. So it's just that all of their teaching comes out of Unity and Religious Science, but they're an independent. They're just independent. They're not associated with any of the big churches. And so I'm an independent New Thought minister, which is perfect for my personality. And then, Steve Smith said he'd help me get started, and then things happened. Things changed. Jim Lee resigned, and all that kind of stuff. So,
I'm realizing that you and I were at Christ Unity at the same time.
so I knew who you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sort of. Actually, I don't think I really knew who you were until I came to some services down at the PAC over from here.
Okay.
Because I don't remember. I remember the singers more than I did the musicians. Because it wasn't very long that I was at Christ Unity coming to services anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. I was pretty much over in that little prayer group and just stayed there because I liked it there.
So now you are here at Spiritual Life Center.
I am.
Okay, so that is now you're in community.
Yeah. It's different for me. This is the first church, and I'm not sure what this says about all of you, but this is the first place I have ever belonged. I didn't say fit in. It's the first place I've ever belonged. And all of the other metaphysical churches, most of them aren't that open. Even metaphysicians can get pretty dogmatic. And this is the first place. And honestly, I spent, from the time when Jim Lee left Christ Unity and all that stuff happened, it was 3 years. So I had been ordained. It was 3 years before I actually got a foot in here. And Steve Smith was here. I stopped by one day and I said, I was in tears. I said, I'm in a desert. And he said, well, why don't you start a prayer group? And Claire was getting ready to start her book group. And Claire said, Deborah can do the book group. And Steve says, no, she's going to pray. You're going to do the book group. And so I was coming to her book group, and two or three people came to the prayer group. And there was, what was his name? Robert. He was a psychiatrist, I think, and he came almost every week for a while, and we would talk, and then we would eventually getting around to doing the prayer service, but we would just sit and talk about different things. And one day he said, this is spiritual exploration, and this is what you should do.
So that's where that title came from.
And that's where that came from. And then my sister died in October, or in September, and about 3 weeks later I came in and they told me that he had died. I don't remember that. It was October or anyway. Yeah.
So Robert who?
Robert. He was a really tall guy. He wore one earring and he wore pajama. Yeah. Yeah. He was amazing. Yeah.
I have to share, I feel compelled to share that the Spiritual Life Center is the first community for me, too, where I feel
there's something
a belonging.
Yeah, there's something about getting into the workings of it, or being able to be part of the staff, or it takes a while, but once you're here, or if you're being interested in being part of the congregation, it's just like here you are, And my doing that little thing with Robert, which seemed like a little thing, I know that Louise and probably some other people saw me come in every single week. I didn't complain about the fact that there was one person coming. I just came and did it, and I came in and did it, and I came and did it. And I think that showed them that, and then I got invited to do maybe a meditation or something, I can't remember. And then I got invited to do something else. And then it just, some point, I think it snowballed, you guys. And, I don't think I've ever had a working relationship like the one I have with you. Ever. That we just throw ideas around, and this is one of the best, Paula's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Oh. But, It's so much about just putting one foot in front of another, and there is no destination. So it's like how I got to where I'm going. Obviously, this isn't a stopping point for any of us. So when we talk about this is how I got here, but I didn't plan this. I mean, on some level, I thought I was supposed to be a minister, and then I ran from it like hell for many, many years. I remember I had one opportunity because I know that my mentor would have helped open doors for me, and he had a lot of doors he could open. And we were at a New Thought conference, and I went into this meeting with all of the ministers from all over the country, and I remember sitting there, and I'm probably all of 31, 32, and I thought, there's nothing in this room but ego. And I said, I don't want that, and I walked away from it for years. Years and years and years. Because for me, this isn't about, I mean, we all have our egos and we want people to like us, but it's about the work. And that's one of the things that I love working with Paula is because it's about what we're doing. It's what we came here to do. And getting the nerve, the courage to actually do what I came here today. Paula has an excuse that it's music. I mean, it's like there's this tangible thing that she does. Like, I'm a musician, I play music, I do this. When you're this nebulous kind of woo-woo metaphysical something or other, and it's like, what do you do with that? And starting
You listen.
You listen. And the group I ended up starting, the Thursday morning group, it came out of watching people, when I'm all of 25, come into a Unity church, and they would start to meditate, and they would start to open up, and stuff would start happening for them. And then that would be kind of scary, because they might hear a voice, or they might have a vision of, none of this is like Saul being thrown on the ground stuff, but things started to happen. There are people who come and ask me about it now, and there was nobody for them to ask. That particular church had absolutely no social events whatsoever. There were the licensed Unity classes, and there were the Sunday services, and that was it. And you could probably get a little spiritual counseling, but if you wanted to come say, I was meditating, and I saw this amazing, wonderful thing, and it spoke to me, and what do I do with that? There was nothing. And even at the age of 25, I watched people leave the church. And of course, watching people start to open up and then shut back down again, that was really painful for me. And I knew I couldn't fix it, but it was like, if people had a place to do that, and it took 35 years and whatever to find a place and people who were willing to do it, or able to do it. That's kind of how I got to where I'm going.
Well, shall we open this up for some Q&A?
Oh, sure.
All right. Would anybody like to? Penelope.
Well, I remember speaking to Reverend Deborah, and she hadn't started doing WOW yet, but she said, Spirit has told me to get prepared. And I remember that. And comment I'd like to make, this goes along with what you say, is people have to have a place to express themselves. I got that when I was first in this church, and we had this wonderful lady who was playing the piano and singing, and we were just, it was amazing, but then what do you do with it?
Right.
Where do you go with it?
Yeah.
So it's so wonderful to see it all evolve, where there's so many opportunities here to go someplace and do something with it.
Yeah.
So I agree, we're wonderful.
Yeah, I wrote in my journal about the time that I talked to you. I was actually hearing a voice that was saying, it wasn't just saying, are you ready? It was going, I'd hear it, are you ready? And then I'd hear, are you ready? And then I was like, are you ready? And then about 3 weeks later, I got called in to talk to Marge and James about WOW. It wasn't WOW back then about Wednesdays. And I had said no to Wednesdays 4 times before that. I have no idea why I said yes that day. They just explained it to me. They told me how hard it was going to be. They told me they were starting from scratch. And then they told me again how hard it was going to be. And then they said they couldn't pay me. And I said yes. Like, okay. Oh, and by the way, I did tell James that I would try it. I said, I'll try it for a while. And we never did go back and revisit that.
Well, so Marge, she reeled me back in from my second job at the Davis Waldorf School and said,
That's right.
You are going to come and help Deborah get this going.
Oh, so that's what brought you back in from that. Should I apologize, or are we happy
No,
that?
no, not at all. I mean, of course, I would prefer to be all in.
All in. Yeah. All right, other questions? Come on, you can ask. Really, no one's curious. This is good. Oh.
I remember when I first met you, you drove up to my house. We did not know each other at all. Dave and Rachel were supposed to go to something and had to cancel at the last minute. And so Deborah and I went to this thing at the Salam Center. We didn't know each other. I didn't know if she worked for the church. She didn't know who the heck I was and why we were going. And it turned out we went and sat on either side of James. In the front table, we were actually being honored there for something. And that was when I first met you, and I thought, this is cool that we can do this.
Yeah, it is cool that we just sort of trust each other.
It just
and
didn't matter.
Yeah.
We trusted each other, and we had a wonderful time. And everybody wanted to meet us.
Oh, yes, and
It was very
yes,
cool.
Yeah, and that was also the night I was driving a rental car because my car was in the shop or something, and I'm used to my car having the lights on, and so we drove about 2 blocks after the thing without the lights on because I didn't really. And Susan still talks to me, so this is good. This is good. Yep.
It was a very cool way to meet. And
Yeah, it was.
had instant trust.
Yeah, yep. Excuse me.
Well, I have a question for you. So, Paul, did you have your hand up?
I remember you at the PAC. First time I saw you, I was kind of recruiting speakers for Unity of Stockton because I wanted that church to thrive. And I had spoken to Michael Moran. He said yes. Dave Lyman said yes. Well, it took him a while. He said, I'll think about it, yes. And you said yes. That's a wonderful lesson that you are teaching us, saying yes to that voice, yes to life. I'm glad that you're saying it again so that when that comes up for any of us, we don't just poo-poo that away and think and get scared because it's frightening sometimes to say yes to life. And I just want to thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. I will tell you that mostly yes comes out of my mouth, and then later I'm going, wait a minute, what did I just... I said yes to something. It's really interesting because when I was sitting there talking to Marge and James, and I really didn't think I wanted to do something at night like that, and I do not know why yes came out of my mouth. It just did. So I was trusting Spirit.
I want to say that it's just been an honor to work with Deborah in the same vein of the yeses, because I don't know if she even recognizes the huge growth things you take and have taken in the last 3 years that I've seen it. And I can tell you, I remember little things that you guys, I know you don't see it, but like the first time she was asked to speak on the podium as part of the announcements. I don't remember if you remember thinking, well, I do meditations. And she even, when she started feeling the call to even do meditations in a much deeper and bigger way, it was one of the biggest collaborations I've seen is when she said, can I do meditations when the choir is singing? And that just started a whole new thing between these two ladies who have a beautiful connection. But when she started, I mean, you've done things from saying yes to announcements, which I remember that day. And I remember the day you were going to do your first WOW talking about your sister. And how, and for all of us, I remember her asking, would you come and watch me practice? Because I see her, and I have such a vision of who you are and what you do for us in the spiritual explorations, but for you even then to be vulnerable because you weren't sure that's what, and I remember thinking, is she kidding me? This is what she's born to do. And to see you then I just can't even tell you, and then for you to accept the assistant minister position here, it's just, and the yes there, I don't know, it was probably a yes before you got to think about, did I say yes? I think we talked about that
I don't
before,
think
too.
you asked me. I think
I
you just
told
me
you.
it was going to happen. Yes, we're making you know. I walked out of her office, and I walked straight outside and got in the car and drove around. And I called Cherie Larkin, and I said, they're doing this. And she said, well, I'm not sure if I should congratulate you or pray for you. And I said, probably both. And then she said, you didn't chase this. This is chasing you.
Yeah.
So it's probably going to be okay.
And then and I hope your rebel spirit is always, because it's fun. I only want to tell you my first time meeting Deborah, and I think it was my first. Can I tell you one of the first things you said to me after stuff? So she said, and I think it was day 2 of my being on staff, and she said, "Hi, I'm Rev Deborah," and she said, "I do Wednesdays, and I just want you to know that they're almost 95% the whole year. This is January 4th or 6th or so." And he goes, the whole year is pretty much 85% booked. I just want to tell you that. But I'm probably not going to be here. So I just didn't want you to worry. But I think I'm being called somewhere else. And I thought, and I'm like, hi, my name is, and here's the list, and I'm probably going to be leaving too. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm Elaine. And let's just talk first. and then it's just, and I know you go within and you seek, but I love that about you because you're just so real. You're one of the most real people I know.
Well, thank you. That drove my mother crazy, all my realness running around. And I just don't know how to be any other way. There's just something in me that doesn't. Yeah, I spent a few years with all the repression, and it has taken me a while to get brave enough to step out and do some of the things I do now. And when I talk about personal stuff, one of the reasons I do it is so that other people know that it's safe for them to do it. And at the same time, I'm always thinking how self-serving that must sound to other people. And I realize, people come to me all the time that it makes me seem real and they appreciate it. And yet there's part of me going, that's your stuff. You shouldn't be throwing it on everybody else. And yet the feedback I get. And so, but the thing is this mouth kind of just does what it does. And if I really try to control it, it gets really bad. So. Yeah, so it just kind of backs up on you. So.
Tell a story about Lake Tahoe.
About what?
You and I.
Lake Tahoe.
Lake Tahoe. I asked you how was.
So yeah, it's like, okay. So Jerry walks up to me and he says, "So how was Lake Tahoe?" And I said, "It was okay." And I didn't want to talk about it because I hadn't really been out of town for a long, long time. And I hadn't spent the night out of town for almost 5 years. Jim and I just stopped traveling when he started having health problems. And what had happened was when I got in the car to drive up there, I hit the tree line. Where is that, about Camino or something, like going up 50? I hit the pine trees, and I grew up in the mountains, in the pine trees. And it's like I left my body, and I swear, I said, did I just die, and am I still controlling my car? Because I felt so out, and it's like, no, you're fine, you're in control of your car. And I stayed out there. I got up, I was very connected with the woman I stayed with. We did nothing but creative stuff all night long. The church service itself, they're lovely people, but it was like the smallest part of it for me, because I was out here having some sort of experience with spirit. And then even coming home, this song by Tanya Tucker came on, and it's called "Send Me Flowers Now," because I don't need love when I'm gone. Don't waste your time and money and treasure on my poor old breathless body. It's a great it's almost like a dirge, but it's a great song. And that played on the way back, and I was still in this zone for days and days, and Jerry comes up and goes, "How was it?" And I'm going, "None of your damn business." I don't think I was quite that rude, but it was like I couldn't talk about it because I'm still processing it, and part of me is still out there in that space. Something really shifted for me.
And that was just because probably not everybody probably knows that this was a very recent thing.
It was September 8th is when I spoke up there. And, when they added an assistant minister to the back of my name, I said, this isn't going to change anything. I'm still just going to run WOW. And of course, projections and expectations change. And of course, I would be taking on more. And when Greg Lavoie was here, and he was talking about callings, and I said, I tried to convince myself for a while that wasn't going to make any difference. He said, it didn't work, did it? And I said, no. But it took several well, my husband had a pretty serious health issue just about the same time that this happened. And then, just all this stuff started piling on. And so it was a pretty interesting summer. And over Labor Day, I managed to have a really wonderful just kind of meltdown and get rid of all of that tension. And then I went to Tahoe a couple weeks later, and it's like it cleared it all out. And yes, we're very busy now because gala time, but gala time, yeah, that's kind of what it's like. And
I hope you're all coming because it's going to be. Are you all coming?
Yeah, it's going to be.
It's going to be a really, really great time.
Yeah. So
yes.
So anyway, that's part of my story. I'm sticking to it. Basically, I got here and Paula and I've had this conversation too. I'd love to get up here one of these days and let's just have a spiritual conversation together when we've got time and energy. But neither one of us have really done a lot of planning in our lives. We've just put one foot in front of the other and somehow gotten to where we're going. And I don't think, you've not done an enormous amount of planning you didn't have an agenda, did you?
No.
No. And
I had my life has kind of been led by taking steps and discovering that's not what I want to do.
Yes, yeah, and yes, and
then making choices from that point.
Yeah.
But I've never had like a vision, a goal out there, that I'm heading towards, because I've understood from a long time that, the path is going to.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest ones for me was, as a professional musician, and then I became a mother, and I returned home from Europe, and I one day found myself doing yard duty at an elementary school, and I just stood out there. I was like, well, this is interesting.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, we've had very similar, very, very different paths and very similar experiences. And we both, I think that's one of the reasons we work so well together, is we're both willing to just put one foot in front of the other and see where we get to next. So.
I don't know. There might be some value to setting goals, but I find that if you do that, then your calling actually gets hidden, can become hidden.
Yeah.
Because you have a mindset on something. I don't know. Maybe it works for some people, that type of directional approach to life.
Well, if I had become a minister in my 20s and 30s like I thought I was supposed to, I would have gotten so locked in. I wouldn't have worked, because because there was a certain way I thought I needed to be a minister. And of course, the way I do this is a 180 from what I would have thought when I was like 30 years old, how I was supposed to be. And to be able to come in and just be myself, and to sit in a room with, by the way, the people who come to my Thursday morning group is amazing. They have developed critical thinking skills that just blow my mind. But to be able to sit with a group of 15 or 20 people, because apparently I don't know what an actual small group is, and have them be willing to just rip themselves open and talk about spiritual stuff is the greatest honor that I could probably have in this world, and I could have never thought that up. I could have never invented that or designed it myself. So I think we're running out of time. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to do the offering?
Shall I do the honors?
Why don't you do the honors?
All right. So we are going to take an offering at this point, as we do. And I know you all understand that that these offerings, they keep us all going. It is in support of each and every one of us and all of the beautiful people that we bring in from outside of the community that are like the extended community, and it's all in support of our mission to love, serve, and remember who we are. So if we remember that always, and we can say our blessing of this love offering together. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God.
Thank you, 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 thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Pouring down, your love is pouring down. Your love is pouring down. Your love is pouring down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I think we're just exactly the right number of people to. Okay. Oh, man, we got it. Great. Let's take a deep breath. Let's do our prayer for protection together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. And may the joys of the world go with you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Paula. It'd be fun to when we both have energy.